Hello and welcome to the Real News Radio, your weekly broadcast where we discuss current events, politics, and the failure of our government to represent we the people. We have got a lot of information we want to get into these 2 hours today. First hour we're going to cover the news that the mainstream puppet press dare not report. And then in the second hour we have a very special guest, Mr. Doyle Shamley, that's going to be joining us. If you're unaware of this gentleman, he was the co-host of the radio show Hour of the Time with Mr. Bill Cooper, world-renowned researcher, author of the book Behold a Pale Horse, the audio series Mystery Babylon, very prevalent through the 90s. This gentleman was shot and killed on his front doorstep November 5th, 2001 by the Apache County Sheriff's Department in Arizona, a story that needs to be remembered, and we're going to be covering that in our second hour. I urge everyone to listen to this interview. We are very excited about having him joining us today. So that will be next hour. We're going to get started with some of the news today, and to begin with, this was reported by Associated Press, and the title is Cost of Bailouts Hits a Whopping $24 trillion. So we've been following this story even before the economic by design collapse transpired last October. But it's just amazing what they're actually reporting here. According to the watchdog overseeing the federal government's financial bailout program, the full exposure since 2007 amounts to a whopping $23.7 trillion, or $80,000 for every American citizen. The last time we were able to get a measure of the total cost of the bailout, it stood at around $8.5 trillion 8 months down the line, and that figure has almost tripled. The $23.7 trillion figure comprises about 50 initiatives and programs set up by the Bush and the Obama administration, as well as the Federal Reserve banking system, according to the Associated Press. In testimony which will be delivered to the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee tomorrow, Neil Borowski, the Inspector General for TARP, will tell Congress that the Treasury Department has repeatedly failed to adopt recommendations aiming at making the TARP program more accountable and transparent. According to Borowski, taxpayers are in the dark as to who has received the money and what they are doing with it. As we have been repeatedly highlighting, the destination of some $2 trillion in TARP funds was the subject of a lawsuit filed by Bloomberg late last year after the Fed refused to disclose the recipients. The suit is still ongoing as Bloomberg attempts to discover the names of the private financial institutions that received the money. The American people will ultimately pick up the tab as the dollar is devalued because the Fed lends the money from its own balance sheets, or essentially just prints more money. As a San Francisco Chronicle article explained last year, wages will not keep pace with the inflation, and if we add to the equation the raft of new taxes being introduced by the Obama administration, the consequences are clear. Another lowering of the living standard for millions of middle-class Americans. Meanwhile, Henry Paulson, one of the chief architects of the bailout and the man who committed financial terrorism by threatening the Congress with martial law and food riots if they didn't pass the initial TARP package, brazenly pocketed $200,000 in Goldman Sachs profits tax-free while handing billions in ill-gotten gains to his bankster buddies. All this after he pulled a bait and switch by charging the entire focus of the bailout from buying up toxic debts to giving the money directly to the financial institutions. I would like for the American people to listen to what we've just said here. You are being robbed and sold out by the Federal Reserve banking system via the Secretary of the Treasury, and they have made Congress nothing more than ceremonial. Every American $80,000 in debt to this financial Ponzi scheme that is bent on enslaving the American people and reducing us, as Virginia Fox said last week, to not a second rate but about a third rate country. Brian, before we go any further in the news, your thoughts on this?
I agree 100%. It was ironic, some of the article you're reading there, I actually thought it was something you wrote for a minute. the Federal Reserve printing up money. It was like, man.
This is Associated Press.
Yeah.
I mean, the news is out there. They're admitting to it. You don't see it on your local news media in the evenings because they're controlled puppet media. But this is the actual facts of the matter, and the American people better wake up and see the dire straits that you and your children are facing. Compliments of Bush administration and then the Obama administration that is continuing the failed policies of George W. Bush. So with that in mind, we want to continue with the news. We have been reporting ever since we started on the FEMA exercises, military exercises, the military in the United States. This week is no different, so go ahead and get us started with that, Brian.
FEMA to conduct massive NLE 09 martial law exercise next week. This is by Kurt Nemo of InfoWars, July 23, 2009. On July 27th, FEMA will conduct National Level Exercise 2009 NLE 09, scheduled to run through July 31st. NLE 9 will be the first major exercise conducted by the United States government that will focus exclusively on terrorism prevention and protection, as opposed to incident response and recovery, a FEMA fact sheet states. It is designated as a Tier 1 national level exercise, or top-off, which are exercises conducted annually in accordance with national exercise programs, which serve as a nation's overreaching exercise program for planning, organizing, conducting, and evaluating national level exercises, according to FEMA. In addition to the participation of domestic partners, FEMA exercise will also include foreign troops. This year, the United States welcomes the participation of Australia, Canada, Mexico, and the United Kingdom in NLE 09. The FEMA fact sheet does not explain why participation of foreign troops is necessary, of course, direct violation of Posse Comitatus. In February, D.H. Williams, reporting for the Daily Newscaster, revealed meetings held between FEMA, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Indiana County municipal officials in the vicinity of Chicago. The feds allegedly told the officials that every county in the country would be required to prepare a hazard mitigation plan, including plans to vaccinate the entire population within 48 hours and prepare mass graves. In addition, according to Williams' source, the county was asked to make plans for hardening police and fire stations, putting in hardened bunker-type buildings around town, and draft up plans for the possibility of up to 400,000 refugees from Chicago entering the county. Finally, it should be noted that FEMA was organized specifically for martial law. On July 5th, 1987, the Miami Herald reported on the existence of camps operated by FEMA should martial law need to be implemented in the United States. The existence of camps in RX-84, short for Readiness Exercise 1984, came to light during the Iran-Contra hearings. And there you have it, writes Alan L. Rowland. The real purpose of FEMA is not only to protect the government, but its principal vehicle for martial law. This is why FEMA could not respond immediately to the Hurricane Katrina disaster. Humanitarian efforts were no longer part of its job description under the Homeland Security. The FEMA press release states that the feds are conducting a large exercise in order to respond to emergencies and disasters when, in fact, they are conducting a martial law exercise with not only state, local, and tribal partners, but foreign troops as well.
And also, with that same report, Wayne Madison, a very well-respected investigative journalist, reported that the triggers include a continuing economic collapse with massive social unrest, bank closures resulting in violence against financial institutions, and other fraudulent presidential elections that would result in rioting in major cities and campuses around the country. So they, Brian, are getting the facility in preparation for the mass vaccinations. We're going to be doing a segment this hour of what's transpired again this week with regards to the plans for the mass vaccinations of the population. But here again, as Brian is reporting, another huge martial law exercise coming up next week, and foreign troops involved. once again, as we reported earlier. We're going to break. We'll be back here on The Real News, Barron and Bryan, in 3 minutes.